The summer of 1876 brought more than heat to Hollow Creek. It brought death. Sarah Mitchell watched from her bedroom window as another wooden coffin was carried down Main Street, the fourth that week. The cholera had arrived on a supply wagon from the east, and now it spread through the settlement like wildfire through dry grass. Her father, the town doctor, hadn't slept in 3 days. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his hands trembled when he thought no one was looking. Sarah knew what that meant. He was losing the battle. She was 19 years old, raised proper in a white clapboard house with lace curtains and a picket fence. Her mother had died giving birth to her, so her father had raised her alone, teaching her to read medical texts when other girls were learning embroidery. She could set a broken bone and identify pneumonia by the sound of a cough. But nothing in those books had prepared her for this. The disease struck without warning. 1 hour a person seemed fine, the next they were doubled over with cramps, their skin turning gray as their body expelled every drop of fluid it held. Most were dead within a day. The town council held an emergency meeting in the church. Sarah sat in the back pew beside her father, listening as Mayor Henderson proposed closing the town borders. No one in, no one out. Quarantine the sick in their homes and pray the healthy stayed that way. Old Mrs. Patterson stood up, her voice shaking with fear and anger. She wanted the Lakota camps driven farther away. They were the problem, she insisted. Disease always came from savages. Several people nodded in agreement. Sarah's father rose slowly to his feet. His voice was hoarse but firm. The cholera came from contaminated water, he explained, not from the Lakota people. The source was likely their own well system, compromised by the recent floods. But his words fell on frightened ears. Fear makes people cruel, and Hollow Creek was drowning in fear. The vote passed. Armed patrols would enforce the quarantine, and any Lakota found near town would be driven off with force. That night, Sarah's father collapsed while tending to a patient. She found him on the floor of the Baker family's home, his face pale and slick with sweat. She knew the signs immediately. Her hands moved automatically, getting him home, getting him into bed, but her mind was screaming. Not him. Anyone but him. She forced water between his lips, bathed his burning forehead, and whispered prayers she had learned as a child. But the disease was merciless. By dawn, he could barely speak. His final words were instructions. In his desk, bottom drawer, a leather journal. Pages marked with red ribbon. Formulas he had been researching. Combinations of herbs and minerals that might slow the disease, might give the body time to fight. His hand gripped hers with surprising strength. Find help, he whispered. The Lakota healers. They know things we don't. Promise me. She promised, tears streaming down her face, knowing the town would call her a traitor for even thinking it. He died as the sun cleared the horizon. Sarah sat beside his body for an hour, holding his cold hand, feeling the world shift beneath her. Everything she had known was gone. The house felt enormous and empty. Through the window, she could see smoke rising from the quarantine fires, where they burned the possessions of the dead. The church bell tolled again, announcing another loss. How many now? 20? 30? The town was eating itself alive. She retrieved the journal with shaking hands. Her father's careful handwriting filled page after page. Notes about traditional remedies, observations about how the Lakota treated similar illnesses, sketches of plants she didn't recognize. He had been preparing for this, trying to bridge 2 worlds of medicine. But he had run out of time. She pressed the journal to her chest and made her decision. The town could hate her. They probably would. But she had made a promise to a dying man, and she would keep it. Tomorrow, she would slip past the patrols and find the Lakota camps. She would find help, or she would die trying. Sarah left before dawn, when the patrol guards were tired and careless. She wore her darkest dress and carried only her father's journal, a canteen of water, and a small knife tucked into her boot. The prairie stretched endlessly before her, painted in shades of purple and gold by the rising sun. She had never been beyond the town borders alone. Girls didn't do such things. But then again, girls didn't usually watch their entire world crumble in a matter of weeks. The grass reached her waist in places, and she moved through it like a ship through waves. Behind her, Hollow Creek grew smaller until it was just a dark smudge against the landscape. Ahead, the Black Hills rose like ancient sentinels, their peaks touching the clouds. That was where the Lakota camps were, according to her father's notes. 3 hours walk, maybe 4. She kept the sun on her right shoulder and walked steadily, conserving her strength. By mid-morning, her feet ached and sweat soaked through her dress. She had grown soft living in town, she realized. Out here, the land demanded everything from you. The wind carried strange sounds, bird calls she didn't recognize, the rustle of animals in the grass. Every shadow made her jump. What if she encountered a bear? A snake? Or worse, what if the Lakota refused to help her? What if they remembered the harsh words spoken in town meetings, the violence threatened by men like Mayor Henderson? She found a creek around noon and stopped to rest. The water ran clear and cold over smooth stones. She drank deeply, refilled her canteen, and studied her father's journal. He had drawn detailed maps showing landmarks, a lightning-struck cottonwood, a red rock formation shaped like a sleeping buffalo, a meadow filled with purple flowers. She was on the right path. That knowledge gave her courage to continue. The afternoon grew hot. Her skin burned despite her bonnet, and her legs trembled with exhaustion. She was beginning to think she had made a terrible mistake when she saw them. 3 riders on the ridge ahead, silhouetted against the bright sky. Her heart hammered against her ribs. There was nowhere to hide, nothing to do but stand and wait. The riders approached slowly, deliberately. She could make out details now, horses painted with symbols, long dark hair streaming in the wind, weapons clearly visible. They surrounded her in moments, their horses stamping and snorting. The men stared down at her with expressions she couldn't read. One of them spoke in Lakota, his tone questioning. Sarah swallowed hard and opened the journal, pointing to the drawings of medicinal plants. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "My town is dying. Cholera. My father said you could help." The word cholera they seemed to understand. They exchanged glances, their faces grave. The youngest of the 3 dismounted. He was tall and lean, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to look straight through her. He wore his hair in 2 long braids, and a scar cut across his left eyebrow. He studied the journal carefully, then looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He spoke in halting English. "Why you come alone? White men kill Lakota who come to town. Why we help?" It was a fair question. Sarah met his gaze directly. "Because people are dying. Because my father believed medicine should have no borders. Because I have nowhere else to turn." Something shifted in his expression. He spoke rapidly in Lakota to the other 2 men. They argued briefly, their voices sharp. Finally, the youngest man turned back to her. "I am Dakota. They call me enemy in your town. Last winter, I take horses from your corrals. They shoot at me, I shoot back. Your people hate me. But I know the sickness you speak of. It kills Lakota too. Come. Our healer must decide." He gestured toward his horse. Sarah hesitated only a moment before accepting his hand. He pulled her up behind him with easy strength, and she gripped his waist as the horse leaped forward. The other riders flanked them, and they rode hard toward the hills. The wind whipped Sarah's hair free from its pins. Her proper world was falling away with every hoofbeat, and she felt a strange exhilaration mixed with her fear. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Whatever happened next, Sarah Mitchell of Hollow Creek was gone forever. They rode for over an hour, climbing into the hills through pine forests that smelled of resin and earth. Finally, they emerged into a valley where dozens of teepees stood in organized circles. Children played near the creek while women worked on hides and tended cooking fires. Everyone stopped to stare as they entered. Sarah felt their eyes on her, felt their suspicion and curiosity. Dakota helped her down from the horse, and she stood unsteadily, her legs weak from the ride. An elderly woman approached, her face creased with age and wisdom. Dakota spoke to her in Lakota, showing her the journal. The woman's expression was unreadable as she studied Sarah. Finally, she spoke in English. "You come seeking medicine for your people. The same people who call us savages and thieves." Sarah nodded, too exhausted and frightened to lie. The old woman's name was Winona, and she had been healing the sick for over 60 winters. She led Sarah to her teepee, which smelled of sage and sweetgrass. Bundles of dried herbs hung from the poles, and clay pots lined the walls. Dakota followed them inside, standing near the entrance like a guard. Winona gestured for Sarah to sit, then examined the journal page by page. Her weathered fingers traced the sketches and notes with surprising gentleness. "Your father was a wise man," she said finally. "He understood that all healing comes from the earth, and the earth belongs to no one people." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes at the mention of her father. "He died yesterday," she whispered. "The cholera took him despite everything he knew." Winona nodded slowly, her expression softening slightly. "Then you know what it is to lose what you love most. The Lakota know this too. Your soldiers killed my son 3 years ago. He was hunting, far from any town, but they shot him anyway. They said all Indians are enemies. So tell me, why should I help the people who took my son?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Sarah had no easy answer, no platitude that would make the pain go away. All she had was the truth. "I can't give you back your son," she said quietly. "I can't undo what was done. But there are children in Hollow Creek right now who have done nothing wrong. Babies who don't understand hate. Old people who just want to live their final days in peace. If you help them, you show them that Lakota people are better than they believed. You show them what real strength looks like." Winona studied her for a long moment, then turned to Dakota and spoke in Lakota. He responded with what sounded like an argument, his voice rising with passion. The old woman cut him off with a sharp gesture. More words were exchanged, heated and intense. Finally, Dakota fell silent, his jaw clenched. Winona turned back to Sarah. "I will help, but there are conditions. The medicine I make requires sacred herbs that grow only in the high places. The journey takes 2 days on foot. You cannot make it alone, and none of my people will risk being shot by going near your town." "What are you saying?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. Winona's eyes were hard as flint. "Dakota will guide you to gather the herbs. He will help you make the medicine. Then he will take you back to the edge of your town. But you must swear an oath. When this sickness passes, you will tell your people the truth. Tell them the Lakota saved them. Tell them the man they call enemy, the horse thief they wanted to hang, was the one who brought them salvation. Make them see." Sarah looked at Dakota, who stood rigid and silent. His face was a mask, revealing nothing. She understood the risk he was taking. If the patrols caught him anywhere near town, they would shoot first and ask questions never. This wasn't just about medicine. It was about justice, about changing hearts, about forcing Hollow Creek to confront its own cruelty. She took a deep breath and nodded. "I swear it. I'll make them see." Winona handed her a deerskin bag. Inside were dried roots, strips of bark, and small clay containers sealed with wax. She explained each component carefully, how much to use, how to prepare it, how to administer it. The medicine wouldn't cure everyone, she warned. Those too far gone would still die. But it would slow the disease, give people's bodies time to fight. It would save many who would otherwise perish. Sarah memorized every word, knowing lives depended on her getting it right. They would leave at first light, Dakota announced in his rough English. "Bring nothing but water and strong shoes. The mountain trail is difficult." He left the teepee without another word, his posture rigid with suppressed anger. Sarah watched him go, confused. "Why does he hate this so much?" she asked Winona. The old woman smiled sadly. "Dakota's younger sister died of the white man's smallpox 5 years ago. He was 15, helpless to save her. Now he must help white people, the very ones who brought that disease to us. It burns his heart like fire, but he is a warrior. He knows duty." That night, Sarah lay in a borrowed teepee, unable to sleep. Strange sounds surrounded her, voices speaking in Lakota, dogs barking, horses whinnying in the darkness. She thought about her father, about the promise she had made to him, about the oath she had just sworn to Winona. She thought about the people dying in Hollow Creek, and about Dakota's sister, dead from smallpox. The world suddenly seemed so much more complicated than she had ever imagined. Right and wrong weren't simple anymore. They were tangled together like tree roots, impossible to separate. Dakota came for her before dawn. He carried 2 packs and a rifle, and his face was set in hard lines. They walked in silence as the camp began to wake behind them. Sarah wanted to say something, anything to break the tension, but words failed her. What could she possibly say that would matter? He was doing this despite his hatred, despite his loss, because his elder had commanded it. That took more courage than she could comprehend. The climb began gently, through forests thick with pine and aspen. Birds sang in the canopy, and sunlight filtered through the leaves in golden shafts. Dakota moved with the confidence of someone who knew every rock and root. Sarah struggled to keep up, her town shoes slipping on loose soil. He never looked back, never slowed his pace. It was clear he wanted this journey over as quickly as possible. By mid-morning, the trail grew steep and treacherous. Loose stones shifted under Sarah's feet, and several times she nearly fell. Dakota finally stopped at a narrow ledge and turned to face her. "Your shoes are useless here," he said bluntly. "You will break your ankle." He pulled a pair of moccasins from his pack and tossed them to her. Sarah hesitated, then removed her ruined shoes and laced up the soft leather. The difference was immediate. She could feel the ground beneath her feet, could grip the rocks with her toes. "Thank you," she said. He grunted and continued climbing. They stopped to rest near a waterfall that thundered down the mountainside. Sarah's muscles screamed with exhaustion, but she refused to complain. Dakota shared dried meat and berries from his pack, eating in silence. Sarah studied him covertly. The scar above his eyebrow, the calluses on his hands, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. He was perhaps 22 or 23, hardened by a life she couldn't imagine. Finally, unable to bear the silence any longer, she spoke. "Tell me about your sister." His head snapped toward her, eyes flashing with anger. "Why? So you can feel better about what your people did?" Sarah held his gaze. "No. Because I want to understand. Because my father taught me that to heal, you must first acknowledge the wound." His jaw worked as he struggled with emotion. "Her name was Zikala," he said finally, his voice rough. "It means bird. She was 7 years old. She loved to sing. The white traders came to our winter camp with blankets, gifts they said. Within 2 weeks, half the children were dead. Zikala lasted 4 days. I held her while she burned with fever, while her skin erupted with sores. I could do nothing. Nothing." Sarah felt tears slide down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Dakota stood abruptly. "Sorry does not bring back the dead. Sorry does not stop your people from taking more land, killing more buffalo, spreading more disease. Your town calls me enemy because I took horses. But your people took everything from us. Our hunting grounds, our sacred places, our children. And now you come asking for help." The bitterness in his voice was like acid. "You're right," Sarah said quietly. "You're absolutely right. What my people have done is monstrous. I can't defend it, and I won't try. But Dakota, holding onto that hate will destroy you. I know because I've seen it in Hollow Creek. Fear and hate are eating that town alive. My father used to say that revenge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." Dakota was silent for a long moment. "Then your father was wiser than most white men. Come. We have far to go still." The afternoon brought them above the tree line, where the wind howled and the air grew thin. Sarah's lungs burned with every breath. The path narrowed to barely a foot wide in places, with sheer drops on one side. She tried not to look down, focusing instead on Dakota's steady steps ahead of her. He moved like a mountain goat, sure-footed and fearless. When she stumbled, his hand shot out and grabbed her arm, pulling her back from the edge. "Be careful," he said, and for the first time, there was something other than anger in his voice. "Your death would make this journey meaningless." They reached the high meadow as the sun began its descent. Sarah gasped at the beauty. Thousands of purple flowers carpeted the ground, swaying in the wind. The view stretched for miles in every direction, rolling hills, dense forests, distant rivers gleaming like silver threads. "This is it," Dakota said. "The medicine flowers. We gather them tonight when the moon rises. The plants are most powerful then." He set about making camp, building a small fire in the shelter of some rocks. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped sharply. Sarah huddled near the fire, wrapped in a blanket Dakota had brought. He sat across from her, the flames dancing between them. The stars emerged overhead, more than Sarah had ever seen in her life. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. Dakota nodded. "This is sacred ground. My people have come here for healing for many generations. I brought you here because Winona commanded it, but also because you speak truth. That is rare in white people." Sarah felt something shift in the air between them, a softening of the wall he had built. When the moon rose, full and bright, they began gathering the flowers. Dakota showed her which ones to pick, how to harvest them without damaging the roots. They worked side by side in the silver light, their hands often brushing as they filled the bags. Sarah found herself acutely aware of his presence, the warmth of his body, the sound of his breathing. It confused her, this feeling. She had been raised to fear the Lakota, to see them as savages. But there was nothing savage about Dakota. He was intelligent, honorable, and carrying a pain that echoed her own. "We should return to camp," Dakota said finally. "We have enough." As they walked back, Sarah stumbled on a hidden root. Dakota caught her, his arms wrapping around her waist. For a moment they stood frozen, her back against his chest, his breath warm on her neck. Then he released her quickly and stepped back. "Be more careful," he said gruffly. Sarah's heart pounded. "Thank you," she managed to say. They finished the walk in charged silence. They began the descent at first light, moving faster now that the gathering was complete. Sarah's body ached from head to toe, but determination drove her forward. Every minute mattered. Every hour they delayed meant more deaths in Hollow Creek. Dakota seemed to sense her urgency. He pushed the pace hard, stopping only when absolutely necessary. By late afternoon, they had reached the foothills. The prairie spread before them, and in the distance, smoke rose from Hollow Creek's chimneys. Lakota called a halt as the sun touched the horizon. "We go no further together," he said. "Your patrols will shoot me on sight. You must go alone from here." He pulled out the ingredients Winona had prepared and reviewed the instructions one final time. Sarah listened carefully, committing everything to memory. Her father's medical training served her well. She understood dosages, proportions, the importance of exact measurements. When Lakota finished, she recited it back perfectly. He nodded with what might have been respect. "You learn quickly. Your father taught you well." Sarah looked toward the distant town, then back at Lakota. "Come with me," she said impulsively. "Not into town, but close enough that you can see what happens. Close enough that when they are healed, you can see their faces when I tell them the truth. You deserve to witness that." Lakota shook his head firmly. "Too dangerous. If they catch me, everything we have done means nothing." But Sarah persisted. "Please. You've trusted me this far. Trust me a little further. I won't let them hurt you. I swear it on my father's grave." Something in her intensity reached him. He was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers. Finally, he nodded once. "I will stay in the hills above your town. If there is trouble, I leave. Agreed?" Sarah smiled, relief flooding through her. "Agreed." They traveled together as darkness fell, Lakota hanging back in the shadows as they approached Hollow Creek. The town looked different somehow, smaller, more fragile. Lights flickered in windows, and she could hear the distant sound of the church bell tolling again. Another death. How many now? She left Lakota hidden in a grove of cottonwoods and approached the town alone. The patrol guard nearly shot her before recognizing her face. "Miss Mitchell. Where have you been? The whole town thought you were dead." She pushed past him without answering, heading straight for the makeshift hospital they had set up in the church. The scene inside was nightmare made real. 30 or more people lay on pallets, their faces gray, their bodies shaking with chills. The stench of sickness was overwhelming. Mrs. Patterson looked up from where she tended the dying. Her face was gaunt, exhausted. "Sarah, thank God. But where were you?" Sarah ignored the question and got to work. She commandeered the church kitchen and began preparing the medicine exactly as Winona had taught her. She boiled water, measured ingredients with shaking hands, and prayed she remembered everything correctly. Within an hour, she had prepared enough for everyone in the church. She moved from patient to patient, lifting heads, forcing the bitter liquid past lips, speaking words of encouragement. Some were too far gone, already slipping toward death. But others responded almost immediately. Their breathing eased, their color improved slightly. By dawn, the change was undeniable. People who had been at death's door were sitting up, taking water, speaking in weak voices. The improvement spread through the church like sunrise driving back darkness. Sarah worked tirelessly, preparing more medicine, tending to everyone who needed it. Mrs. Patterson gripped her arm. "What is this miracle? What medicine are you using?" Sarah met her eyes steadily. "Medicine from a Lakota healer named Winona. Gathered from sacred ground by a Lakota warrior named Lakota. The medicine that's saving your lives came from the people you call savages." The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Patterson's face cycled through shock, disbelief, and something that might have been shame. Other people heard Sarah's words and began whispering among themselves. Mayor Henderson, who was himself recovering from the early stages of cholera, sat up on his pallet. "That's impossible. You're telling us Indians saved us?" Sarah held up her father's journal. "My father knew they had knowledge we don't. Knowledge we refuse to learn because of our pride and fear. Now 27 people are dead because we were too stubborn to ask for help. These people are alive because one old woman and one young warrior chose mercy over revenge. Over the next 3 days, the medicine worked its miracle. The death toll stopped climbing. People who would have died instead recovered. The quarantine was lifted. Life began returning to normal. But the town was changed. Sarah made sure of that. She stood in the church on Sunday and told the entire story, her journey to the Lakota camp, Winona's wisdom, Lakota's reluctant help, the sacred flowers gathered by moonlight. She told them about Zitkala, dead from smallpox at 7 years old. She told them about the pain and loss the Lakota had suffered, and she asked them to look at their own hearts. Some people listened. Others remained hard and bitter. But something had shifted in Hollow Creek. They couldn't deny that Indian medicine had saved them when their own doctor had failed. They couldn't ignore the fact that the man they had called enemy had risked his life to help them. Mayor Henderson, to his credit, publicly acknowledged what had been done. He proposed sending a delegation to Winona's camp with gifts and thanks. It was a small step, but it was a beginning. Sarah went to find Lakota on the evening of the fourth day. He was still camped in the cottonwood grove, preparing to return to his people. She brought him food from the town and a letter she had written. He read it slowly. It detailed everything that had happened, praised his courage, and thanked him formally on behalf of Hollow Creek. His expression was unreadable as he folded the letter carefully. "Words on paper," he said quietly. "Will they last when fear returns?" Sarah didn't have an easy answer. "Some will forget," she admitted. "Some will go back to hatred. But others will remember. And those people will teach their children. Change is slow, but it's possible. I have to believe that." Lakota looked toward the town, then back at her. "You kept your oath. You told the truth even when it was hard. That is the mark of a warrior." Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest at the compliment. "What will you do now?" she asked. He shrugged. "Return to my people. Continue living. Continue fighting when I must. The world has not changed so much. But maybe I have, a little." He reached out and touched her hand briefly, a gesture that carried more meaning than words. "You have a strong heart, Sarah Mitchell. Your father would be proud." She watched him ride away as the sun set, his silhouette dark against the orange sky. Her world had been shattered and rebuilt in the space of a week. Her father was gone, but his wisdom lived on through her. Hollow Creek would never be the same, and neither would she. She had crossed borders that were meant to keep people apart, and she had found unexpected grace on the other side. She had learned that enemy was just a word, one that could be unlearned as easily as it had been taught. The future stretched uncertain before her. The town would need continued healing, both physical and spiritual. The divide between settlers and Lakota would not vanish overnight. But Sarah had seen what was possible when people chose courage over fear, when they chose to see the humanity in those they had been taught to hate. She would spend her life building bridges, one person at a time, one act of kindness at a time. It was what her father would have wanted. It was what Lakota's sister deserved. It was the only way forward that made any sense. As she walked back toward town, Sarah thought about the medicine flowers growing in their high meadow, blooming year after year under the moon's silver light. Healing had always been there, waiting. They had just needed to be brave enough to reach for it. She touched the moccasins she still wore, the leather soft and worn from the journey. She would keep them as a reminder. Some gifts couldn't be returned. Some journeys changed you forever. And sometimes, salvation came from the most unexpected places, wearing the face of the one you had been taught to call enemy.